All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for turning on the recording. I'm going to go ahead and call this work session to order on AO 2021-27, adopting the 2040 Long Range Transportation Plan. Let's start with a roll call, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Ms. Allard.
Here.
Mr. Constant. Mr. Dunbar.
Mr. Dunbar will be a little bit late today.
Ms. Kennedy. Ms. LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Mr. Perez Padilla. Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Mr. Middleton.
Here.
And Ms. Salatel.
Here.
Great, thank you. As usual, if members want to get in the queue, please put yourself in the chat. If you can't access the chat, please text me. All right, so for today, we're going to have a presentation, I believe, from planning, and then I'd like to see if we have, if Mr. Weddleton and Ms. Zalatel have amendments they'd like to introduce or discuss with us after that presentation. So go ahead, turn it over to planning to kick us off.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Yonganalen. I'm an AMAT Senior Transportation Planner. Do I need to show the presentation, or is somebody else going to display that?
If you could share the presentation, that'd be great.
Okay, just a second. Sorry. Okay, everyone, can you see these slides?
Yes, so we can see the main slide, and then there we go. Now we can see it full screen. Thanks.
Sorry. And I also wanted to point out, I do kind of move my hands around, and I'm more animated when I give presentations, so I apologize for any kind of blur motion that may be happening. I'll try and hold still as best I can. So I'm going to be giving a quick presentation on the 2040 LRTP, the Long Range Transportation Plan. There's about 10 slides, and then we'll get into questions. So hopefully it'll only take about 10 minutes to get through the presentation and leave lots of time for comments, questions, and discussion. So first off, what is the transportation plan? It's a 20-year plan looking at transportation in the Anchorage, Bowl, and Chudak Eagle River over the next 20 years. What transportation projects are expected to be funded and constructed within that area. One thing to note that this 2040 LRTP is a copy of the AMAT's MTP, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is AMAT's long-range plan. So some of you may notice that the cover says LRTP, but in the text it says MTP everywhere. And the reason is it's a copy, and we didn't have enough time or money to go through and change every instance of MTP to LRTP. A couple other things to note: there is a fiscal constraint aspect of this plan, and it's based on what AMAT's came up with, and that hasn't changed since AMAT's approved it. And then there is an air quality conformity determination. So I just want to do a quick brief what is in each chapter and talk about the plan overall. So the first is just kind of showing you the project development. We started the plan initiation in 2017, roughly, and then we immediately moved into developing our public participation plan for the update, doing goals and objectives and performance measures. Then we did an existing conditions analysis, which is taking socioeconomic data and projecting it out to the 2040 horizon and say, what does our transportation system look like if we didn't make any improvements on the system? Because that gives you kind of a baseline to say where are areas of concern. We had a number of public meetings and a survey. We had a charrette where we invited the public over 3 days to come in and express their desires of things they would like to see, where they want the transportation system to head, etc. After that, we took all the information gathered and developed some different scenarios. And then we put that out for a survey again. Then we did some scenario modeling to say, okay, if we went with this scenario, what would the transportation system look like, to see kind of what is the cause and effect. Then we did a project evaluation. to determine which of those scenarios, like which of those projects in those different scenarios worked best for the transportation system. Then we did cost estimates, financial plan, and fiscal constraint analysis. It's all lumped into one, even though you see it as 3 separate here. Basically, what we do is for the MTP, we have to make sure our projects are fiscally constrained so that any money we anticipate getting will be enough to afford the projects that we want to get done. Then we did the draft list of projects, put that out for the public. Then we took those comments and made changes where possible, put that into a draft plan. Then we did the public meeting. Then we did the public hearing where we came to you guys with the MTP. Then we did plan adoption. So this is for the MTP. Once that was adopted, then we put a new cover on and have been bringing it forward to through the Muni process as the LRTP. So it's already gone through planning and zoning, which I'll talk about at the end. Okay, next, I wanted to do just a quick public outreach. Some of the stuff we did, extensive public outreach, including the surveys that I've talked about. We did in-person outreach as well. We had some FAQs, we had a website. We did a lot of public outreach. It's estimated we had 1,200 plus comments during the 3.5 years of this project. So we had a lot to go through. And this is all detailed in the plan under the Chapter 2, Public Outreach. Chapter 3, Goals and Objectives. 6 goals, each kind of have a different number of objectives here. These goals and objectives match up with the federal, national goals and objectives and planning factors. They match up with the statewide as best as possible goals, and they match up as best as possible with the local goals as part of the 2040 land use plan and the comprehensive plan. As part of Chapter 3, we also developed some performance measures. We only have performance measures in there to meet the federal standards from the MTP, so we didn't have time to do any new performance measures for the LRTP itself. Chapter 4, existing conditions. So this is where we took a lot of the data about, crash types, level of service, tonnage, travel time. What does the system look like? Where are there concerns? So this gets into that part where I talked about how do you do, where's your system at right now? Because then it feeds into the next chapter, which is deficiencies analysis. So this is kind of how you start looking at where would you like to see improvements on the transportation system. So areas of red are lower level of service. And so those are areas you'd want to address with projects. So key ones are the Glen Highway, Tudor, Muldoon, and then Ingrid Gamble area, 5th out of town, 5th heading out of town, etc. And then from the deficiencies chapters, we did the financial analysis. It looked at how much money do we have in the short term? Do we have enough to pay for the projects? Do we have enough in the long term to make sure that we're over, that we're under in terms of project cost? So based on our financial analysis, we do have some extra money sitting there, about $14 million. I do realize there's an error on this slide. It is 14.0, not 14.1. So I apologize for that. So I just wanted to kind of show you really quickly how the revenues break down. The revenues are based on MOA bonds, state legislative grants, GO, general obligation bonds from the state, FHWA, so federal money, and FTA money. So that'd be transit. And so we look at all these different revenue sources. We use historical data to say how much have we gotten in the past, how much are we anticipating on getting. And so it's broken down here. Roads, you can see, is the vast majority of the funding. And a lot of that is because the majority of the funding that comes in is FHWA dollars that DOT and PF have direct say on, and they direct it where they want the funding to go. So alternatives development, this is chapter 7. This is talking about how did we kind of get to our preferred alternative. We did different analysis, as I've talked about. We did the scenario development, the modeling, then we did the recommendations scoring. So we have scoring criteria that are based on the goals and objectives, and it helps us determine which projects are going to meet our needs the best. And then we apply fiscal constraint and get the preferred alternative. Please note that in this document, the only thing you'll see in here for the alternative is the one that was fiscally constrained and selective. So there's different scenarios and alternative modeling and stuff is not part of this document because that was not part of the approved document itself. Chapter 8 is implementation. This is where we wanted to put in policies or action items that are not part of our modeling. So if we wanted to focus on helping with reducing parking or shifting our mode percentage away from predominantly single occupancy vehicle to non-single occupancy vehicle, this chapter is where we start addressing some of those concerns. Please note that all of the policies and action items in this chapter are for AMATs specifically. So if it says do this, that's for AMAT staff or AMATs itself to start looking into. Last chapter is the air quality chapter. AMATs is required to do this, and so we left it in as part of the plan. It's looking at how are we doing in terms of our air quality standards. Overall, we're doing very well. We are keeping underneath the required annual amounts for PM 2.5 and CO, and PM 10 as well. So, and that's through things like Bike to Work Day, or the what AMATS helps to pay are the car heater, the engine block timers that we give out to people. Lastly, we have the Planning and Zoning Commission. So what happened with this is we put it through the Planning and Zoning Commission's timeframe. We received about 155 comments from public, mostly individuals, and then one community council. Of that 155, 114 staff recommended no change. 22 we recommended forward to the next MTP, LRTP update, or more research was needed, and 19 we recommended to change. These comments were reviewed by different groups in the Muni, the Long Range Planning Group, PM&E, Traffic, and Parks and Rec. And then AMATS was there to help shepherd the comments through. So all the responses that you see in the comment response summary came from those different groups. Okay, brush through really quickly. Before we move on to questions, I just wanted to mention something really quickly so we can talk about as well if need be. In terms of time, staff time or consultant time to make changes to this plan, unfortunately, the consultant's contract is ending at the end of this month, and we do not have the ability to extend that beyond March 31st. And then my time is going to be pretty limited as well, because I'm going to be moving on to the 2050 MTP update for AMATs. The RFP for that is out, and we're hoping to have a consultant on board next month, or maybe in May, early May if possible. So that is all I had. So thank you.
Great, thank you for the presentation. So if folks have any questions about the presentation, please put yourself in the queue. Ms. Zalato?
Thank you. I just wanted to express I'm a little bit frustrated with the last comment about making changes to the LRTP, Long Range Transportation Plan, because the Assembly had, through the MTP, the Metropolitan Transit Plan, put together rather significant comments. And a lot of those comments were pushed to the future because there wasn't time or opportunity to make those changes. And I don't think we should forgo that opportunity again. I understand the time constraint, but I think we have, and I guess if I don't see Dean online, but I think we have the opportunity as the body accepting the plan to amend the plan, and that we should be able to do so without constraint as long as it meets the code requirements. And that might just be a question I have to email council and get feedback on, unless someone else knows.
So I guess I'll just quickly respond to that. In terms of making change to the document, of course, that's what this body is here for, and that's what I'm bringing it forward. I'm just letting you know that my time and the time of the consultants is coming to an end on this document. So I will do as much as I can in the amount of time I have available, but my priorities are to AMATs. And so as this is not an AMATs document, I will be shifting to the AMATs priority when it gets started, which is the 2050 MTP.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
No, thanks. It's just a broad comment for Aaron. You know, if we do a good job amending this LRTP, then you have a real easy jumping off point for the next MTP, and it'll save you a ton of time. I have a bunch of questions, Felix, so if you could give me the hook at any point if you want to roll through things. But one thing on the funding is we have some $11 million coming from, transportation act that the feds passed in January, I think. And is that money, could that possibly be used for planning?
Is that the money you're talking about that goes to AMATs?
I think, yeah, it's a new 11.25 million or something like that that's coming.
Yes, that would be for funding. So whatever the policy committee decides, ultimately that would go for it. It can be used for planning, yes.
Okay, so could it be used for the LRTP and fund you or someone else in the staff there?
It's not really for staff time. We're funded through the UPWP, the Unified Planning Work Program. That kind of sets what our funding goes towards. And I guess I would have to defer to Craig on this, but we have pretty limited resources as it is, because this is not the only plan that we have to do. Every planner is pretty busy at this point, so I don't know.
Okay, once you have money, then it starts helping out. You can find the resources typically. So Craig, do you know if that money would be available for this effort?
Well, to answer that question, I guess I would say that that money can be used for planning purposes. Those are extra funds that are coming into the municipality, well, into AMATs for any of the regular stuff that we do. It would need to be amended in, you would have to put a project in the tip for it, so you'd have to amend that in. But it's a question of two things. One, obviously the funding, but also just the staff time. With only 4 planners who are doing a lot of work, the ability for those 4 planners to be able to do the amount of effort that would be needed on this, you probably have to find an additional person to do that, I guess. There's only so much time in the day.
Okay, no, that's good to know the constraints. Thanks. A couple of things. So, what is the time frame on this?
Well, there's really no time frame. So the MTP is a federally driven document, and we have very specific requirements for it. The LRTP has almost no requirements, either in Unicode. There's no requirements in federal law. So other than making sure, you want to get it updated in enough time to be able to influence or with any future updates, that'd probably be the only time constraint.
Okay, and now the RFP for the MTP 2050 is just going out. So we actually have a few months before, this document, if this document were ready in a couple months, it could lay a foundation for that effort. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe a couple months. Okay. It's real important on the AMAS project to have the fiscal constraint. If we are more aspirational in the LRTP, is there a fiscal constraint component required?
Not in municipal code, no. It's more of just a good planning idea to have fiscal constraint in there for these kind of documents, but that's up to you guys if you want to change it to more of a, similar to how the state long-range plan is. It's more of an aspirational goals and objectives type of thing and less of a nitty-gritty, here's this funding for this particular project.
Okay, so now if we stray significantly from the MTP, as far as, say, fundamentally goals and objectives are significantly different, scratch out some major projects, then what are the implications for the MTP 2040 and also for developing the MTP 2050?
There's no implications for the 2040 MTP because it's already been approved, and there's not enough time for us to go back and do an amendment. An amendment takes a year or 2 to do, and we're already going to be starting the next update. For the 2050 update, what it'll do is it'll help inform. So when we're looking for projects or goals and objectives, we go to any document that's out there, municipal or state, and say, okay, what is their goals and objectives? How can we accommodate them as best as possible in our plan? So it's really more 50 versus the 2040.
Okay, so the MTP just deals with the AMATS area, but an LRTP should also address Turnigan Arm and Girdwood. How can you recommend us handling that?
I guess that's a loaded question, but if you had all the time in the world, I would recommend you start from scratch and start the plan over, because the plan has been developed without those communities as part of it, because they are outside of the AMATS area. Spending the time to incorporate them in, I don't know how difficult that would be, because I believe they have their own transportation plans. Correct me if I'm wrong. But you should look at those and try and incorporate them as best as possible. But the problem is you've already developed the goals and objectives, you've already done the screening criteria, you've already done project selection, you've done implementation. So you would pretty much have to go back and redo all of those to make sure that your document is up to cover those new areas.
Okay, so it's not easy.
I mean,
Okay.
just put it there, but I don't know how beneficial it would be, is what I'm trying to say.
They don't like to be ignored. They're a pretty important part of the city, but it is a challenge. I mean, it's most of the traffic is on one stretch there on the Seward Highway, certainly. Okay, that's all my immediate questions. Thanks, Felix.
Thank you. Just want to note, Mr. Craig Lyon put a comment in the chat that Girdwood does have its own transportation plan. Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding the presentation? You're not seeing any. Then I don't know, Ms. Alato or Mr. Weddleton, if the two of you are ready to speak to any amendments that you might be bringing forward to the LRTP.
Meg.
So John and I haven't had a chance to get together yet. I think the plan to start to create my amendments will be the Assembly's adopted resolution and TP. So that, and then now hearing, in addition to maybe references to Girdwood's transportation plan as a direct reference into the LRTP, since they do have a plan, they are a part of the municipality, if not a part of the AMATS planning or the MPO. So, so it won't be anything, I don't think, new in terms of things that the Assembly hasn't seen before or provided input to before. And I can probably dig up that resolution and get that circulated back to members to refresh memories.
Great, thank you. I want to note for the record, we've been joined by Mr. Dunbar. So I guess just a question to the two of you, since I know the two of you are helping lead a lot of this effort. Do you believe that we'll be able to vote on this on Tuesday, or do you suspect that we will postpone this so that we can get your amendments and other considerations in place?
John's off mute now.
Oh, go for it, John.
You know, I would think not. I think for a couple of reasons. One is we are not under a time crunch. Second is people who are involved with transportation planning, the general public, are used to very extended comment times. I think AMATS is generally very accommodating in that regard. So our normal schedule would seem very rushed to people. Also, I think it would buy time for me and Meg and others to get amendments together. And I'd like to hear what people say too at the public hearing and work from that.
I think I just want to add, and one clarification I want to get. I asked Mr. Shute for the code on the LRTP, and it's just for those who might be interested, 2.10.070. It looks like we have 45 days before then it will simply go to the policy committee for AMATS policy committee for approval, if I'm understanding the code section right. So maybe there is a time constraint, but but I guess we need to get verification on that.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Just a point of clarification on that. That's only for the AMAT's MTP has a clause in it that if 45 days the assembly hasn't given recommendations on it, it goes back to the policy committee for action. The Muni's long-range transportation plan doesn't have a requirement attached to it, as far as I can tell.
Great, thank you. All right, is there any other discussion? Otherwise, it looks like
I have another question.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Aaron, yeah, I know you've been working on new scoring requirements, and I think generally for the ranking the tip. What's the status of that? And could that somehow fold into the our efforts with LRTP?
I'm understanding, I believe we have a work session we're going to hopefully have soon this month, and policy committee to go over the scoring criteria for the tip, and then it has to go out for the public to review. We need that in place so we can get a new tip started later this year, and that can feed in. So for the MTP, that's going to help feed into the scoring criteria that we're going to set up for the MTP. For the LRTP, for this LRTP, I'm not sure how beneficial it would be. It would really only be beneficial if you update the scoring criteria and then rescore projects or score new projects that you put in. Other than that, it's not really going to do a whole lot.
Okay, well, I'm glad that's on track. It's good news. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just want to know, Mr. Schutte put in the chat a link to Anchorage Municipal Code 2.10.070, which regards the AMAT's long-range transportation plan. Ms. Zalatel?
Thanks. John's question raised a question for me, which is just as to reground us in the LRTP, could someone explain how the long-range transportation plan intersects with intersects with the MTP and other plans the municipality has? I think it's really important that we set that foundational level again about what the LRTP does for the municipality.
Okay, I'll take a stab and see if anyone has anything else to add. So the MTP is a document that AMATS has to put together to help with federal funding. And when we are looking at updating the MTP, we look at any plans that are in place at that time or that are going to be soon to be adopted. So we would look at the comprehensive plan, the 2040 land use plan, and we would look at the local long-range plan to see where the local entity is heading in terms of transportation improvements. So are they more focused on biking, walking, transit, or are they focused solely on single occupancy vehicle getting everywhere? We also have to do the same for the statewide side of things. So statewide long-range transportation plan. The Muni long-range plan is really there to help with things like implementation of the land use plan. So, you have the 2040 land use plan, there are certain things you want to implement, but there's this kind of missing gap of, okay, we have things that we want to implement from the land use side, but we really need the transportation side as well and have them kind of joined together. And the MTP is not really for that. It does take it into an account, but that's not its main purpose. And so the would take into account, more closely the climate action plan, if that's part of the comprehensive plan, other things that are part of the comprehensive plan if needed, or any other plan that you want it to be there for. So if you put out a plan that says, we want less less certain type of housing in one location, well, how does the transportation system help to accommodate that? And that's what the transportation plan helps with. So.
Thank you. Ms. McNulty, you wanted to add?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair and Aaron, that was a great summary. I would just add that, you know, when the LRTP becomes an element of the comprehensive plan, and exactly what Aaron said, it kind of helps inform, you know, specific projects. So when we look at things like developing code in Title 21, or even when we're reviewing a rezone or a conditional use application or a major site plan review, all of the standards in those applications, one of the criteria that needs to be met is that the request is in line with the adopted plans. So when we look at the adopted plans, we're going to look at the comp plan and anything that's an element of. So that's how the LRTP actually shapes projects, because that's what we actually have, gives teeth to the reviews that we do on an individual project basis and or code changes that we make. We're going to make sure that they're in line with the adopted plans. And I just want to add maybe a little bit of clarification to this process. The code that Chris Schutte had forwarded is the MTP process, but for the long range transportation process, we're actually following amendments to the comprehensive plan. That's the process we follow for anything that is an element of the comp plan, and that's code section 2103070. And I'm not as fast as Chris, so I haven't been able to get the link in there, but when I'm finished talking, I will look that up and get that in the chat. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, is there any other discussion? Ms. Zalato?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for letting me hop back in here again. I think it's a little bit confusing because the long-range transportation plan started with the MTP, and it's got a completely, I mean, quite frankly, a completely different purpose. So, you know, it'd be my preference to take our time with the long-range transportation plan, as John has indicated, and really make sure it reflects the implementation of our comprehensive plan, the amendments that have been made to the comprehensive plan, and is a really great working document for the municipality, and reflects the goals, the policy goals of the assembly. So I guess it would likely be, you know, my inclination that it will take a while, because I think we should probably look at scheduling another work session once we've been able to have some public hearing, and John and I, and if there's one other who would like to volunteer as well, we don't need to be just two of us. The third set of hands would be great, to make any changes that we would like to propose, and run through those, because I think we're almost starting from an odd position in my view. And I think that we need to kind of step back and take some time with it. And I understand the staffing concerns and the consultant concerns, but if we want this to be a working document, I think it's going to take a working reflective document. It's going to take some time.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other discussion, then it sounds like we will be postponing action on this on Tuesday to some future unknown date, and likely we'll have a second work session once we are a little bit more ready with amendments. Okay, with that, I'll go ahead and close this work session. Thanks everyone for the presentation and for the discussion. And this is our last work session for today, so have a great weekend, everyone.